Welcome back to Living from the Inside Out, Life in the Spiritual Lane. My name's Anne-Marie McElroan, and my guest today is Wendy. We call her Wonderful Wendy. Wendy has an incredible backstory, which I won't get into too much, but I will tell you that she's a former Olympic skier. I believe dancer as well. Is that correct, Wendy? Yeah. And now lives in Rome and teaches meditation. So an incredible background, an incredible life story, really. So welcome, Wendy. Really glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
So I'll start with a really open question, and that's this idea of living from the inside out and what that means to you.
Actually, I think, it was a progressive, gentle sort of a realization. It didn't happen all at once, but there were significant moments in my life that came through conversations and things like this that made me think, rather than anything sort of enormous that was actually happening. I mean, I remember at one point, as a very young teenager, I asked my father, who was a colonel in the army, I said to him, why do your soldiers follow you to war during wartime when they know they could easily get killed? I said, what makes them do this? And of course, he laughed and said, well, the army has certain rules, and if they don't, they get court-martialed. But he said, I know actually what you're asking me. And he said, a lot depends on what you actually do with your soldiers and your people, your companies, before the actual moment. And if each one of those men understand that you have what is best for them in your heart, when the time comes and you get up and you say, folks, we go, they actually follow you. Now, I thought, well, that's miraculous. That's just because it's my father. You know what I mean? I had no way of understanding what he was saying when I was a young teenager. Of course, it was only much, much later that I realized he was right. Absolutely right. There's no technique to it. It's plain caring, kindness. So that was one thing that indicated to me, this particular question. And while I was a dancer in Las Vegas one day, we were used to having people step by at the show and watch the show. And one of the people that loved coming was Sammy Davis Jr., who was really very famous at the time. And he looked at me and he said, I don't really know if you're a very good dancer. And of course, my heart sank because I knew I wasn't technically a particularly good dancer. But he said, but when you dance, it makes people happy and it makes them feel they're dancing. And I thought, well, I've been, fighting to become a better dancer. Maybe I need to look at something else. And of course, I trusted him because he was very well known and he was a very honorable, very honest man that we all adored. Actually, he was sweet. So I took it very much to heart and thought, the important thing is not how good you might be at something, which of course at the time I thought was really important, but the effect that you have on people, and which comes from something that is beyond whether you're good or bad at something. So I think these are the two of the really important moments in my life, which made me realize that it was all about something that I was not concentrating on at all at the time.
Incredible moments. So where did those moments take you? Where did you go with those moments?
Well, I think I carried them with me in the back of my mind someplace, thinking, I will get the answer to this one of these days. Sort of not ever really thinking it might happen. But then one day I went to the Brahma Kumaris Center, and I thought, I'll try the course. Why not? Sounds interesting. And I originally had refused the course because I didn't feel like, having danced for so many years, I didn't feel like sitting cross-legged for the rest of my life. So I said, thank you very much, But someone convinced me, well, you can just come and see how it works. It might interest you. Well, of course it did. And there I started to receive many, many, many answers to all of these various questions that I had been, sort of putting aside, shoving aside in a certain sense, because I had no answer to them.
Right. And so do you feel then the journey from living from the inside out has been one that you've been living since those early days when you were hearing that story from your father, when you had that feedback from Sammy Davis? Did living from the inside out start then, or did it start when you sat down cross-legged in meditation? When did you feel like that? Was there a shift, or has it always been a part of you, that inside out focus?
Well, I would say that probably there has been a spontaneous sort of natural interest in the inside part of the inside out. Although we're all very, very honestly trained to shine on the outside rather than shine inside. I mean, that was clear since childhood. And I only really started understanding it when I started shining the spotlight on the inside and started thinking about it. It had to take definitely a more, sort of an interest. I had to sort of look at it because to be very honest, I thought I would never get the answer to this. I didn't think that the answer was out there, And that was why I continued with the course when I took the course in Raj Yoga, because I was getting answers at last, and I had the impression that there was like a bottom drawer that I had somewhere in my soul, if you like, that needed to be emptied out of all these strangest questions, about why this and why that and why the world was going like this and why my relationships were going like that. And it was, just something that I'd just put into the drawer and could not sort out at all, really, basically. And because I suppose I didn't look for it, because I could manage perfectly well to make my life perfectly functional and logical in a practical way. I mean, there was no question about that. So I didn't sort of feel like I had to pull the drawer open and empty it. You know what I mean? It was only when I started getting the answers that I realized that, I should take a good look and empty that drawer out.
Yeah, that's fantastic image. So you live in Rome now, which is one of the, I mean, really, it's such a center for Christianity. And I know that you know a lot about the world's great religions. And so tell me about, how that experience has helped you differentiate between spirituality on the one hand and religion on the other.
Well, I was brought up actually in a Catholic convent, basically because it was the best choice that my parents had for education in those days, just immediately after the war. And so I was brought up by the nuns in a certain sense, of course, in a fully Catholic context and studying catechism and everything. And of course, I wasn't Catholic, but my parents were not practicing. They were Church of England, but they weren't practicing anything. And they just said, oh, well, it's good that you learn something about a religion. And then when you grow up, you can choose. It seemed a very logical way of doing it. But it was interesting to know what the Christian and the Catholic point of view was. And I could see all along as a child that I wasn't going to end up a Catholic. That was obvious. But then I was more like a bit my parents, not particularly into following any devotional practice. And the advent of spirituality in my life, of course, underlined the reason, because it's so different spirituality and religion is really, really, really different. I mean, anything to do with a religion is actually based on things that are actually quite physical, quite material, where spirituality is based on the non-physical. All the things that you just can't go to the supermarket and buy, like generosity and kindness and mercy and compassion and all those wonderful things. There is no way that you can compound them out of anything that is physical in this physical world. It comes from a spiritual part of you. And of course, in religion, they applaud all of these virtues and qualities. They definitely do. There's no question about that. But they don't, when they're in their practices, they are much more sort of what I would call physiological. It is much more physical. And they recite things like prayers and do things like kneeling. There is a lot of formality on a physical level, which I wondered already then, is this actually all of this formality going to help me? Because my research is for the things that you can't physically touch or you can't buy, like I said, compassion, mercy, etc. What is it going to help me in? Why is this going to help me, this devotional form? And of course, anything that might be statues or pictures and all of that, just didn't seem to help me in any way. Then yet words, I mean, things that people might say could elevate me and make me feel very, very, very centered, but it didn't mean that it had to come from a specific person or something. On the other hand, when not very long ago, when I started concentrating on Pope Benedict before he died, of course, and it was all during COVID crisis, actually, and I had nothing to do, and I was sitting in my computer and I was looking at things, and he, of course, is an incredible Catholic and an incredible theologian, and probably will be made doctor of the church one of these days. I can't see how they can avoid it, really. But on the other hand, when he described what love meant, it infinitely touched me. I mean, he said, it means to be wanted. It means to be accepted. And of course, I couldn't help but say he's right. Now, that was an extremely spiritual answer to a question that could have been taken in an extremely non-spiritual way. And he was pretty good at that kind of a thing. There are some people within religion who are extremely spiritual. He was one of them. And there are people in religion who are not particularly spiritual. You know what I mean? And it's that is actually a very interesting thing, but it's not the same thing. Spirituality and religion is actually not the same thing.
Right. And you've given some examples, like I've heard, physical versus non-physical. Is this formality going to help me? Is it going to elevate me? Is it going to take me where I want to go? What are other differences that you see between spirituality and religion, other things that define, so that it can help people sort of differentiate, get clear, pull those threads apart a little bit?
Well, I've been thinking a lot recently on motivation. And some time ago, because of course everybody is looking for a better world, call it like that, call it whichever way you like to do. And everybody's thinking about and hoping for something that might make the world a better place. And I was thinking, what is it that could motivate me? Now, you can go on a physiological level. Like, I'll give you an example. It's wonderful. Some years ago, they had a wonderful weekend in Rome where everybody who felt that they had some desire to make things better met in certain squares in Rome, and they were given brooms and all kinds of cleaning materials, and they cleaned the squares and took away all the junk and threw away all the trash and all this kind of thing. And of course, it lasted for the time that it lasted. And they had one particular thing that they were doing where they removed needles, because they have a lot of addiction here. They would remove the needles from the parks and the flower beds, etc., so that the city could be a more practical place. And they thought that once they would do this, and they even got men wearing lead-soled shoes so that they couldn't get pricked. And what they thought was that doing it once would be enough. And then they realized that they were going to have to go through the city parks sort of like every couple of years, because this is the way, I would say, negativity or sliding behaviors will impact the public life in a certain sense. Things are not getting cleaner and not getting better. They're getting sliding away, being worse and worse and worse. And I thought, we need something that won't disintegrate in front of our eyes. And I was thinking that the only really big change would be if we motivated ourselves to think differently. If my attitude, what could my motivation be? Now it's difficult to sort of motivate oneself to something that maybe you can't really imagine what a better world would even look like these days. It's difficult, you either go into the past and think, well, like grandfather's day was better. Well, it had its problems too, you know what I mean? But I started again researching again. So the good old computer that's been very friendly. I started researching beauty, because I figured beauty is something that my soul picks up on in its own way. I will, I'm artistically inclined, so anything that is artistic, I will go towards and pick up beauty from there. Otherwise, there's nature, there are children, there are animals, there are all kinds of things where the soul can perceive beauty. And this, I found, had a really profound effect on me. Just the fact that I was concentrating on beauty, and the fact that I was unconsciously, in a certain sense, refusing any thought that was not tying in with that.
Right. Well, I can't imagine a better example of working from the inside out. No. Right. On the one hand, the physical cleaning of squares, and not to say that that's not important, it doesn't have a place, but if you're looking for lasting change, then how can I look inside? And one practical thing that you've just mentioned is really focusing on beauty. And I guess if you focus on beauty inside, if you're perceiving that, if you're imbibing it, then it is acting on you inside. And then what happens, I guess the question is if you're imbibing beauty on a constant basis, if you are seeking out beautiful thoughts, then what happens to those around you? What happens, like, what's the outside impact of that inside work?
You vibrate very differently. There is a much higher vibration. I mean, this is something that is a fact, that we do all vibrate in accordance with our state of mind, the condition of our inner feelings and our soul, And when you are touched by something that is beautiful, there is a vibration that rises. And it's a vibration, although you might not show it on the outside, it's a vibration of joy, of happiness, of lightness, that can have people questioning, where you got this from and how you got it, and maybe what you're on. They might wonder about that too these days. But it's really worthwhile trying, because this all started during the COVID crisis, where we all in lockdown anyway, and there was not much fun to be had, and I decided to do something that would have have some form of an impact that would go with me, more later on, and it worked. And of course, it develops your own understanding, because we're all very different. Each one will perceive beauty in a different way. I mean, let's say, for example, my choice of music is probably not yours, you know what I mean? And whatever you perceive as beauty, possibly I wouldn't. And if you zoom in on you're developing, in fact, you're allowing your own beautiful nature and perception of beauty to shine. And that's a good thing. You're not forcing yourself to understand someone else's concept of beauty. That would not be the right way to go at all. You will respond to and sometimes you're responding to things that you never really looked at. It's a sort of something that we've never developed. What it means to really go and look at what it is that I feel is beautiful, and take from that and enjoy the trip that it'll take you on.
Beautiful. That's great. I have actually one more question that I was thinking about, because oftentimes when we are involved in meditation classes, we'll meet individuals who have been on a religious path and have been have had a negative experience. So they've had a negative experience with religion, and so they've turned away from religion, understandably so, but then are still seeking and are looking for sort of a way to reconnect. So I'm just thinking of those people and how they can find a way back in through spirituality. So just thinking of what we would say to folks who've been connected to religion in one shape or another, and maybe have thrown the baby out with the bathwater.
Mm.
What's the opportunity there? Is there a way for them to hit a reset button and start again?
In religion, there is very clearly, from the example that I gave you of Pope Benedict, there is an extremely spiritual understanding of a lot of things. And if you go towards that, you will find that it will be something that will stay with you and will evolve with you. Where rituals is what it is. It doesn't evolve, which means that it might not at some point bring you the satisfaction that you need, because the soul is evolving all the time. We are changing all the time, even if it's just the outside circumstances that are having an effect on me, or my relationship circumstances, or my age. All of this will impact on you, and you need something that will evolve with you.
Mm.
And spirituality, of course, evolves with you. You will be attracted and will understand things on a more deeper level, or on a different level, when you pass certain should I say, barriers of your life, which have created difficulties. It's difficult to go back and just hope that things, as a young person, I thought that the best thing one could do would be to go and burn a candle. That was what the nuns had taught us. When we had a problem, go and burn a candle and hope for the best, you know what I mean? That turns out that after a while, when you've burnt quite a lot of candles, you sort of hope for something that is more functional, and that gives you a little bit more satisfaction. And of course, it's not something you can do and then sit back and wait for it to happen. That would be a more religious approach, which in many ways is not functioning for people now. And of course, in a religious background, or looking at the religion at the moment, the Catholic religion, because it's the only one I really know, actually. People need role models to look at. And if the role models fail, which every human being, basically has a right to, it can happen, but there is quite a lot of failing going on in the religion at the moment, which the basic crowd of devotees or people who have been taking a lot of sustenance from that religion are not feeling that they can take that sustenance from that religion anymore. Because if it doesn't work for their higher up people, how's it going to work for me who is sitting in the last row of the pews? I mean, this is, I understand it totally. And what is good with spirituality is that you yourself, it all depends on you, and basically your relationship with God. It's between you and him, and there's no one else that you're trying to emulate or copy or anything like that. It just depends on your own progress and what you are expecting, because we all have different expectations. I mean, not everybody has the same idea of being an elevated soul who vibrates very high and is capable of sustaining many, many, many people and bringing a smile to other people's faces. Not everybody has that kind of an ambition. Some people do. You have to be able to, you have to feel, and in spirituality, I feel it's very custom made, and you're the one that's deciding where it's going. And this, I think, is incredibly satisfactory. There's no one there to tell you. It's up to you to choose. And of course, obviously, that puts a bit of responsibility on your shoulders, because it means you can't just sit and let it be done to you. There's no way. You've got to take the initiative. But the initiative pays off. You see, you will feel the satisfaction from that. And just that, should I say, that satisfaction will push you forward, because it'll make you feel really good. And it's your own independence and your own choice.
Well, that's spectacular, and what a great place for us to wrap up. The idea that it's custom made, spirituality is custom made, that it evolves with you, how satisfying it is, but also how active. I think those are great points that you've made, and I think a great way for us to wrap up. Wendy, thank you so much for this really illuminating conversation. It's such a benefit to hear about your decades of experience with this topic. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.